This episode is brought to you by McAfee.
Finish your fantasy lineup?
No, but I'm joining this paid group chat with insider info.
Dude, seriously? Forward it to me. Security alert from McAfee. That group's as legit as that knockoff jersey you're wearing.
McAfee's scam detector is available in all McAfee plans for as little as $39.99 for your first year. Learn more at McAfee.com/online protection.
Disney's Lilo & Stitch has finally landed on Disney+. Now you can watch the global phenomenon at home with your Ohana.
Be good for 1 second.
Lilo & Stitch is verified hot on Rotten Tomatoes with an audience score of 93%.
Perfect.
Stitch is also cute and fluffy.
Disney's Lilo & Stitch, rated PG, now streaming on Disney+. And right now, you can get Disney+, Hulu, and all of ESPN with an incredible limited-time offer. Terms apply.
When we started this year, I don't think any of us realized just how fast the news was going to develop in 2025. This year saw new beginnings and nostalgic returns, and some of this era's greatest athletes cementing their legacies. A'ja Wilson won another championship in MVP, and so did Shohei Ohtani. Ohtani and Victor Wembanyama continue to do things on the field and on the court that we've pretty much never seen.
A drive and 55! Shohei Ohtani continues to rewrite the record books.
The NBA's new TV deal brought back the iconic and most beloved NBA on NBC broadcasts. Tennis was further rejuvenated by the back-and-forth rivalry between Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, and we had multiple Game 7s to decide league champions. And on the negative side of things, sports betting gave us some of the most harrowing scandals in recent memory.
The FBI sweeping in, making more than 30 arrests tonight, including an NBA star and an NBA coach who was coaching a big game just last night.
We're almost at the end of the year now. Every week in this past year was a reminder that sports don't just happen on the field. They ripple outward into politics, culture, money, identity. That intersection has been a constant theme throughout my more than 12-year career covering sports. And part of the challenge and the privilege of making this show has been slowing down those moments long enough to really understand them. Hey, it's Kavitha Davidson. You're listening to Sportly. We started the year with our episode on ping-pong diplomacy, which was the unexpected story of how, in the 1970s, a young American table tennis player's interaction in a bus full of international players influenced U.S.-China diplomatic relations in the 20th century. According to the Chinese, Cowan stumbles up the steps as the doors are closing and the bus takes off. It's only then that he realizes he's the lone American on a shuttle meant for the Chinese table tennis team. But it was a pretty good table setter for how sports are about more than just sports. We literally had the thawing of international relations due to this one sporting moment. And that particular story showed how sports really does highlight our common humanity, despite borders and cultural differences and sometimes antagonistic and warlike relationships. We still have sports in common. From there, we went on to tell you how field hockey helped shape women's sports in America, and we tried to challenge some common narratives about where women's sports in this country came from, where they were built from, how they grew, what the foundations of women's access to sports in the Western world are. Today, we'll be diving into the world of women's athletics with a sport that has played a critical role in the history and development of women's sports in the United States: field hockey. It was an important history lesson and continues to be as we continue to see the growth of women's sports. And unfortunately, I think we're seeing a lot of history lost to misinformation, to political agendas, to an ever-stratifying media landscape. So it's always good to look back and remember the origins of some of the issues that we still deal with today. These episodes really meant digging through that history, and that doesn't always get airtime, but it's also about recognizing how much of modern sports culture was shaped quietly long before it was just a given that women can and should play sports. Then there was our episode on the Boston Marathon, and working on that episode reminded me how much sports can carry collective memory and how much sports can heal. Because the Boston Marathon isn't just about endurance or elite competition, it's about a city and its past and its proud residents, and the way that this single event can hold grief, resilience, and pride all at once. But the truth is, the tragic events of 2013 do not define the race. The spirit that the city demonstrated in the weeks and months that followed, that's what the Boston Marathon is all about. The record $40 million raised for charity in the next year. The nearly 40,000 runners who signed up that year, many of whom gained entry through their charities. And the survivors who returned from the 2013 marathon to finish what they had started, even as many of them were dealing with lifelong injuries. To put it simply, the Boston Marathon has heart. And working on that episode had a particular personal meaning for me, because one of my closest friends, Dan Coe, who is now running for Congress, shout out Dan Coe in Massachusetts, was the chief of staff to the mayor of Boston at the time, Marty Walsh. And Dan is a native Massachusetts resident and a proud Bostonian. And the year after the marathon bombing, he ran the marathon, as he now does every year, and proposed to his now wife at the finish line. It was a really special moment.
Here it is, Dan Coe, Mayor Marty Walsh's chief of staff, proposing to his girlfriend of 5 years, Amy Sennett. The mayor was holding the ring for them. When they crossed the finish line, she said yes. Both Dan and Amy running the Boston Marathon.
But writing episodes like that, we have to be careful not to flatten something that means so much to so many people. In our episode, How the Toronto Blue Jays Became Canada's Team, we looked at national identity through a different lens. That story crossed borders and generations. It went from Quebec to Ontario, and it asked how fandom forms when a team becomes a stand-in for something larger than itself. It was a reminder that sports loyalty is often about timing, access, and shared moments, and not just geography. An injured George Springer stepped to the plate and launched a ball into the left field seats, a 3-run shot that turned decades of frustration into an instant of pure joy. The sound of that swing was more than the crack of a bat. It was the sound of a country remembering what victory felt like. I really enjoyed my conversation with Zach Vanasse, who was born in Montreal, was raised an Expos fan, was an Expos fan for most of his life. And then when the Expos sadly left Montreal to become the Washington Nationals under new ownership, he found himself without a team. And he's now living in Toronto. He's been there for, I believe, 15 years. He's adopted the Blue Jays as his new team, as many Quebecois have in the decades since the Expos left Montreal. So, Zach, thank you for joining us. First of all, how does it feel in Toronto right now with the Blue Jays back in the World Series for the first time in 32 years?
It's pretty electric. It really is. The city's rallied around these Blue Jays all year long, and people had a lot of fun with the team, the run into first place, but I'm not sure at any point along the way there was full buy-in that this was a World Series team, and here we are, you know.
And it was a particularly special episode to do. I spent quite a bit of time in Toronto this year, surprisingly. Toronto's actually one of my favorite cities in the world. It reminds me a whole lot like my native New York. But the Blue Jays were in the World Series for the first time in 30 years, and there was an energy in the city that you can't really describe. And it was pretty cool, even though they didn't win. It did go to a Game 7 and they lost to the Dodgers, but it was pretty cool to be able to experience a few World Series games in my hotel lobby with a bunch of people from Toronto rooting for this team that really is, as we've said, Canada's team now.
REI Co-op presents a perfect outdoor moment with the perfect gift. Picture this. You're ripping with your favorite person. Bluebird skies, blower powder, and frankly, you're skiing like legends.
So sick. Another lap?
Thanks to REI's curation, from lid to sticks, you nailed the gift.
No way. How'd you know?
Does it get more perfect than that? Give without guessing. Shop in store or visit rei.com.
Well, one of the episodes that really stuck with me the most this year was a recent episode we did about the origins of lacrosse, which is a sport that was created by the Haudenosaunee people, Native American people who are still fighting for their right to play under the flag of their own nation. That story forced us to confront a contradiction at the heart of sports, how origins can be celebrated while sovereignty is ignored. That episode was particularly information dense. It was emotionally heavy, and it was impossible to wrap up neatly because the Haudenosaunee are still fighting for that right, as lacrosse is going to be featured in the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. In January 2025, the governments of both the United States and Canada jointly called on the International Olympic Committee to grant the Haudenosaunee Confederacy an exception to its usual rules and allow them to compete as a standalone team.
Their ancestors invented the game. They perfected it for millennia. Their circumstances are unique, and they should be granted an exception to field their own team at the Olympics.
As recently as July, a group of Republican New York State senators formally wrote to the IOC urging the inclusion of the Haudenosaunee in the Games. To date, the IOC's official position, there continues to be a debate about whether or not the IOC will allow them to compete in the sport that they created as their own nation instead of having to choose between Canada and the United States. As 2025 unfolded, we also covered moments that felt defining in real time. We saw new laws and policy shifts that reshaped American sports, from athlete compensation and labor protections, the continuing negotiations for the CBA in the WNBA, for example, to the ongoing transformation of college sports as player pay and coaches' salaries continue to come under the spotlight.
Welcome back to Power Lunch. A new era is beginning for college sports. Effective today, colleges and universities are now permitted to directly compensate their student athletes. Just outright pay them with a paycheck.
And when the NBA and Major League Baseball were hit by multiple gambling scandals this year, it opened up questions that we explored elsewhere on this feed. Questions about oversight, transparency, and what happens when the business of sports moves faster than accountability. Also, what happens when an industry, a billion-dollar industry like sports, is expected to police itself when it comes to something as fraught, but as necessary, as legalized sports betting. And the fact that we can't wrap up those narratives in a neat little bow is why stories like that matters, and why we try to bring them to you here on this podcast. That's something that listeners might not always be aware of, just how much work goes into scripting and fact-checking episodes like these. I'm the host and the voice of this podcast, but I gotta tell you, I do a very small amount of work in comparison to our scriptwriters and fact-checkers, and certainly sound editors and producers. Shout out to Paroma Chakravarti. This is a whole team effort here. The research, the rewrites, the constant balancing act between context and storytelling, making sure that these episodes are interesting to you and sound rich, but are also informative and accurate. You know, in a, again, media landscape where accuracy seems to be waning and less valued, I'd still hold my foundations and journalistic tenets really true to heart. Narrative podcasts live and die on trust. All of journalism lives and dies on trust with the reader, the listener, the viewer. And that trust means that the homework has been done and that the story is being told with care. And now, standing at the end of this year, it feels less like a conclusion and more like a pause before the next wave of news and scandal hits. Next year, North America is going to take center stage in sports in a way that we haven't seen in a long time. The World Cup is coming to Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
The FIFA World Cup is one of the biggest spectacles in sport. 48 teams, 104 matches, one winner. Or maybe two. Sure, one team will lift the iconic trophy, but with an estimated $11 billion in revenue coming in, FIFA might be the real winner before a single ball.
And the build-up to that World Cup is already reshaping cities, stadiums, and the conversations about what it means to welcome the world and to be part of an ever-globalizing society. The conversations about the exorbitant cost of ticket prices, with FIFA recently announcing that they are cutting some of those prices because of the backlash, has made international news and has even bled into our recent localized mayoral race with our mayor-elect Zoran Mamdani talking about it on the campaign trail.
It should be something that people can enjoy regardless of how much money they have in their pocket. And yet for so many, the prospect of even just being a spectator, it's completely out of reach.
So how ready are we really to host this giant event? And what does hosting something this big leave behind once the spectacle of it all moves on?
Today marks 100 days until the start of the 2026 Winter Olympic Games in Italy. Athletes are preparing, and right now, many of the biggest names in winter sports are in New York at the Team USA Media Summit.
And this morning, we're joined by...
And on the scale of international mega events, I'm also really looking forward to the Winter Olympics in Milano Cortina in February of 2026. You might not know this about me, but I grew up a competitive figure skater. It's the only sport I actually was ever really good at. And I love the Olympics, and I particularly love the Winter Olympics. And it'll be very exciting to see if the U.S. women can make a dent in these games after pretty much a full decade, a full couple of Olympic cycles of rebuilding their program and trying to restore former glory and once again be competitive with the Russians and the Chinese and the Japanese skaters. We're also looking ahead domestically to massive moments across the NFL, the NBA, the WNBA, Major League Baseball, and the continued expansion of women's sports. These are seasons that are shaped not just by competition, but by massive media deals, by collective bargaining agreements, by governance changes, and by fans who expect more transparency than ever before. The next year will also bring ever more questions. How will college sports continue to evolve? Which leagues will actually learn from recent scandals and reckonings? And which athletes will end up defining the next year, not just by how they play, but by what they choose to say? Will this be the year that marks the end of LeBron James's storied future Hall of Fame career? We've gotten some indications recently that Serena Williams is planning some kind of a comeback, whether that's in singles or doubles with Venus, we don't know. We did see Venus make an incredible comeback, competing in singles in the US Open for the first time in years, but also making a remarkable run with Leylah Fernandez in doubles. And it would be really fun to see the Williams sisters together again, for sure. And what else are we going to see from Shohei Ohtani? What more can this man actually do? Sportly will be there for all of it. The research, the reporting, and the questions that don't fit neatly into a box score that you've gotten used to. We'll keep following the threads that others overlook, and we'll sit with these stories long enough to understand why they matter. So as 2025 comes to a close, I'll leave you with some of these questions and the space to think of your own. And we'll figure out the answers together in the coming year. Thanks so much for tuning into Sportly today and this past year. Tune in January as we dive into another great story. If you have thoughts or suggestions for a topic you'd like me to cover, I'd love to hear from you. Feel free to email me at kavitha@immigrantlypod.com. If you like what you're hearing, rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Sportly is an Immigrantly Media production. This episode was produced by Paroma Chakravarti. Our executive producer is Sadia Khan. Our sound designer and editor is Paroma Chakravarti. Our theme music was created by Simon Hutchinson. Other music is by Epidemic Sound. Tune back in next week and every week after for more Sport Lane.